Welcome to yet another Checkpoint Expert Talk session. Today, the rules and engagements are more or less the same. We will talk for 40 minutes. This is a free plan, unfortunately. I reserved some time for question and answers at the end of the party. Please stay on mute when joining. And the subject is Kernel Debug. Best practices about how to do this. So the idea is to talk about Kernel Debug, why we need this, what we need to know before we start Kernel Debug, what to do and how to start it, and most importantly, how to produce the best result possible. And finally, I will talk about FWCTLZ debug, which is commonly used on the field, and I will try to convince you that this comment is not actually the best practice. So the idea about the kernel debug, why do we need to use kernel debug on the field? It's very simple. We only use it as the last resort when any other troubleshooting steps didn't yield any debug result that we can understand. That means, let's say we have some weird connectivity issue and we try to figure it out. We put some traces on the firewall with FW monitor, we review the logs, and we still cannot understand what's going on. That is about the field use of the system. Obviously, we are not trying to debug per se kernel operations. This is a work of Checkpoint developers and quality assurance personnel. We are trying to resolve our issue that we have them. So the reasons that the kernel debug is considered the last resort is, well, it's heavy. You are asking kernel to start something that it's not doing during the usual operations. It will print out much more information about its own decisions to the debug buffer. If you already overwhelmed in terms of performance, that may cause additional performance overhead as a result, even stability issues. And it has to be cared with care. You need to understand what you're doing and why. And this is exactly the subject of the session. I will try to explain to you how to deal with the kernel debug. So let's take a look. On the system. I have something queued up. First of all, to remind you what kernel chains are, the Checkpoint has multiple units in the kernel, modules that process the packets one by one before firewall security decisions is done. Most of the operations are done by chain called FW or VM. There are two of them, inbound and outbound directions. And 99.9% when we are trying to run the debug, we will be putting some flags into that are related to the firewall operation. The rule-based enforcement, not issues. It's all done by chain module called FW. Now, there is also notion of kernel debug modules. This is something completely different. These are not the chains. These are pieces of software with different debug flags that we'll be using. And to look on them, we can run just FWCTL debug. And then we will see multiple debug modules. And one of them is module FW. However, take care, this is not the chain. This is just the model that allows us to trace different operations that are done by the firewall. And especially with our 80.10, there are some others that are responsible for rule-based enforcement. In the previous session, I've shown you already the debug of the model that is called UP. this model that is responsible for enforcing the new rule base, unified policy rule base. So how do we deal with debug? To start printing out information about kernel operations, we need to create a buffer. So the first would be command to add a buffer, DMACC-buff and -buff. And we need to put here a size of the buffer. The size is in kilobytes, and the maximum size of the buffer is 32 megabytes. Despite we're using 64-bit kernel, this is still a limitation of the kernel debug buffer. Just in case, the kernel prints messages, even if the kernel debug buffer is not there. These messages are going into varlog messages, and you can see them there. And there are already some debug flags that are raised for different models. You can see here some of the models have okay, I'm sorry. Thank you, guys. I was not sharing my screen, so let's start over. So to see the kernel debug, now I hope you see the screen. Can you? Guys, okay, let me share the desktop. That would be better. Okay, and thank you for this message. And okay, let's start over. So I was talking about the kernel chains, and the commands fwctl chain will show us the chains. And I was talking about fwvm kernel chain models, and then I tried to show you, unfortunately without success, CTL debug, the kernel models. And the models I was talking about are this one. This is the model FW, which is not the chain, but model with the same name. And also I was talking about the model UP, which is responsible for enforcement of the unified policy in our 80. So to start the DMACC, we need to define the buffer. If we don't define the buffer, kernel messages go to varlog messages. Debug-buff allows us to define the buffer, and the size, the maximum size we can have is 32 meg. This is what we have. At this point, we're not ready to start debug yet because we need to raise some flags. To raise the flags, we are adding flags to the models, and we can do it in a different types of way. So we need to know which flags to raise and how to add this flag to a particular model. If we run fwctl debug and something, for example, flag drop, that will add that will put drop flag only to model FW. To check this, let's see that this is what happens. So in model FW, I only have flag drop, which is not good because this is not the default setting. To reset it to default setting, we put 0, and then we will see that by default, model FW already has 2 flags raised, which are error and warning. So let's start it from the beginning, the debug, and then I want to add flag drop. I use it with plus. And if I look what is raised for model FW now, the flag is added. I can also remove it, and this is something that you can do on the fly. we run -drop, the page will remove the drop flag already. Anytime, if we want to see what flags are up in the system, fwctl debug will show us. Now, what if we don't know which flags to raise? If we, well, usually you look into documentation. There is a very nice document, Kernel debug flags, that describe the whole procedure, describes all the modules and flags for them. For model FW, you will see here there are quite a few flags. You most probably don't need all of them, but it's nice to have a reference. Let's say we don't have this flag, well, we don't have this document. There is also the option to see something. If we do a mistake, any improper input into fwctl debug will print out the help. And the help starts with the options. This is the description. You could also run fwctl-h for help, by the way. And then there is a list of the models and all the flags for these models. Okay, so let's try to do some debug. My model FW already has flags, error and warning. I will add flag con just to see how connections are going. And to start reading out the buffer, you do fwctl kdebug -buff. This command will start printing out the information from the buffer to the input device, which is my SSH session for the moment. If I start it like this, okay, debug -f. If I start it like this, I will see quite a lot of outputs. And mind you, this is a lab environment. All this output is for my SSH session. This is not really handy in the production environment. You will see lots of information that is not relevant for you. Even in my case, this flag will print out information about each and every packet going through the firewall kernel. So what I want to do here, I want to limit this information to something more readable that I could probably try to analyze on the fly. To do so, there is a mechanism that is very similar to the debug, to FW monitor, in fact. -e allows you to add inspect filter, which is one-to-one filtering that you would do with FW monitor. So in this particular case, I'm trying to filter by the IP address of the host, which in this case will be source or destination. And yet again, I start reading the buffer. If I browse to the end of it, there is no connection to this address at the moment, so it's relatively clean. Now, what I want to do, if I ping this particular host, then only then I will see the information about the packet. So this is one piece of the best practices. If you want to filter it and make it more readable, make sure you put additional information, additional inspect filter about your hosts to make sure you're looking at the right connection. Okay, so let me start the presentation again. So this is how the best practice is basically defined. You need a debug buffer. Mind you, in the production environment, you will see quite a few messages that kernel will be printing, and with lots and lots of connections and many flags raised, debug buffer can be overflown. In this case, you will see the messages, buffer is full, and that amount of messages are dropped. So you want to be very careful with the size of the buffer. It's the best practice to make the biggest buffer possible, 32 MB at this moment, with this particular kernel we are dealing. And concerning the flags and filters, try to filter it to the connection and put as low amount of flags as you can live with to see what really happens. Also, with -v, you can limit the outputs to particular VS. If you are running kernel debug in VSX environments, by default, kernel will print out all the information for all the VSs with the flags that you have raised. Next part is output. I was showing you how to put output on the CLI to the output device, to SSH session or to the console. This is not actually the best practice. The best practice is to send it to the file and try to analyze offline. This is much more useful because there will be quite a lot of the information that you will have to go through even with limited amount of flags. Finally, you need to reset it to default. This is something that I didn't do in my session. So fwctl debug 0 will reset all the kernel debug options to the default value. Never forget to do this, because if you stop reading out of the buffer, you can overflow your Verilog messages again. Okay, so one more thing to do is to, I've shown you that you can actually add flags on the fly and remove flags on the fly. If you are looking at the debug real time, you can open a different SSH session and run the adding the flags comments or removing the flags from a different sessions while looking on another one with the debug outputs. That helps to clear out things that you don't want to see. Filter by connection, and also if you want to analyze debug to make sense out of it, it also helps to run FW monitor or TCP dump in a separate session to see what's going on. So fwctl debug command, when you push it on the console, will show you all the models and enabled flags already. And if you are not sure about the syntax or about how the particular flag is spelled, -m or -h will print you out the help menu. So this is what I did. Well, I added the buffer of the maximum size. I use 5x9 just to make sure that the buffer is maximum. I added the connection flag to see what's going on. I added the filter with inspect coordinates similar to FW monitor, and they start reading on. And finally, I reset the debug to 0 to make sure that the debug parameters are back to default. This is extremely important on production environments. Again, buffer size is critical. You don't want to lose the messages, and you will see a lot of messages in the production environment. And limited amount of flags. Try to be as exact as possible with the flags you're choosing, because it will be verbose as it is already, and filter by the traffic. I've seen a lot of cases when checkpoints support engineers try to run fwctl debug all to raise all the possible flags, and then your output explodes with lots and lots of information that maybe even not relevant to the problem you are trying to resolve. Adding on the fly, you do it with plus and minus, and when you have very substantial output, when you cannot see the things on the fly, and this happens a lot in the production environment, you want to write it into the file. So to do that, you run fwctl kdebug -f -o, and then you give the file name. And if you want to run a rotation of the debug output files, you can add it by -m and the number of the files to keep, and -s for size of each file. Mind you, and I didn't manage to find any reference to what S actually means, whether it's a kilobytes or megabytes or bytes. The size for debug is always in kilobytes. So if you want to run one file the size of 1 meg, you put 1000 after -s. One more very useful feature, especially when you run FW Monitor and you want to analyze it offline with Wireshark, -t will add timestamp into the kernel output debug. Each message will come with exact time. Small t will add it up to a second, and capital T added to microsecond. In this way, you can synchronize the messages and FW monitor outputs when you also analyze FW. And -v and vs ID will allow you to print out the vs only. For R80.10 and up, if you are doing connectivity with the kernel debug, do not forget to run module UP, which is responsible for the unified policy handling. And you can refer to the previous session where I show how to do this. Now, let's talk about fwctlz debug. This is a macros that does basically several things. It defines a very small buffer. The buffer will be 1 megabyte only, and you put all the flags in a single command line, which makes it really cumbersome to use. The usual use case, the regular use case I'm seeing a lot is run fwctl debug drop to see why particular packets are being dropped. In the production environment, it means that you will explode your output device with thousands and thousands of drop messages, and then you need to filter them somewhat to find any particular message. First of all, most of this information should be available in the logs, so it might be unnecessary. Also, the buffer is very, very small to be used in the production environment. That means that even if you try to catch some particular drops, you may just miss it because the buffer is full and messages are not there. When you press Ctrl-C after running this command, it will reset the commands to default. So my personal issue with fwctlz debug, which was undocumented feature for a long time and now leaked out to the field and to secure knowledge, my personal problem with this is that it does not provide you flexible control. You don't control the buffer. It's really hard to add flags on the fly. And it basically, because of this buffer size, it's maybe even dangerous when you run it in the production environment. So, personal opinion on this matter, not the best practice. Okay, thank you very much. If you have any questions for the matter, and I apologize for not sharing my screen. At the moment, if you If you want to ask the questions, please make sure that you are not on mute. I will unmute everybody.
Why don't you just turn around and decide which of these 5 individuals you're going to strategically culinary design?
Guys, do you want to ask any questions? Anybody? Okay, if no questions, thank you very much for participating. I probably would, the recording will be offline probably tomorrow. I have to edit it a bit to edit out the thing when we were not seeing the screen, most of all, and I will put it online and I will publish it on the blog, hopefully tomorrow. Thank you very much, and see you the next time.